Hayden Kuchel, our neighbour from AGT, has come to join us here on Flow. Great to have you with us.
Thanks, Ricky. Yeah, great to be here.
Now, your facility here at AGT is quite impressive from the outside. We'll pay you a visit in a little while, but tell us, who are AGT?
Right, yeah. So our acronym AGT stands for Australian Grain Technologies. We're a breeding company, so plant breeding company. What that means is we develop new varieties of plants for growers to use, crop species. So wheat, barley, lupin, durum, canola. We're making sure that we can develop better varieties for farmers to use. That means they're better off in the future.
And you've just had this win, I suppose. You've managed to secure a license for the germplasm for durum. Just tell us a bit about what durum's used in a household context, but also how significant that is for AGT.
Yeah, so durum's really interesting, and you've asked me a question now that I'm going to get my geek on, so I'm sorry about that. But bread wheat, I'm going to start there. Bread wheat is a really interesting thing because it's actually three different grasses that merged together a long time ago to form our new version, what we call bread wheat. And durum is two versions of those wild grasses. So it's related to bread wheat, but not quite the same. And the way durum is used is to make pasta primarily around the world. So think couscous, think pasta. That's what durum is used for. And so the reason it's used is it's nice and yellow, and it's got a really hard kernel, and it's high protein, and that makes good quality pasta. So that's durum. And it's a really important part of the Australian mix of crops. It's not grown anywhere near as widely as bread wheat, and it's more of a niche crop. But where it is used, the value is in the fact that you can get a higher price for it. So from a grower point of view, that's really important, and it gives growers the opportunity to access higher paying markets. And it's grown primarily through the mid-north of South Australia and in related areas, and over in parts of upper New South Wales. But there's other important production zones down around Calibre, for example, and people interested even into the MIA or Riverina on irrigation.
So just before we talk about where it's great for growers, just on the dietary front, in the kitchen front with that, we've got a lot of people these days with intolerances, gluten intolerances and that sort of thing. My own son has his own condition, which is about he has to avoid your average bread. Where does durum feed into that? Is it in the gluten-free realms, or is it to have other health benefits that people have identified?
No, it fits alongside bread wheat, so it relies on gluten. So this is the tricky thing. People say, well, why can't we just have wheat without the gluten? And it's like, well, unfortunately, one of the most important things about wheat is its gluten. Not only is obviously protein for those who aren't allergic, the protein is really healthy for them. But more importantly, it's the gluten that provides the stretchiness, that provides the mouthfeel. And when you have pasta, pasta that falls apart into a mush is not good quality pasta.
Oh, yes. I've eaten his gluten-free pasta, and all the kids are like, no, you can have that, mate.
I actually found a good, the pasta manufacturers won't be happy with me, but I found a pretty decent soybean one the other day, which it wasn't too bad. But look, you can't make pasta the same without durum, and even pasta matted bread wheat is not as good. And so, San Remo, for example, or the Italian pasta manufacturers just religiously use durum because you need that gluten, because durum actually has some really good quality gluten that holds the pasta together, so that when you cook it, you have this nice bit of pasta to hold the spaghetti, to hold the pasta sauce on with it. Yeah,
well, naturally, farmers and commodities will follow the market and where the market is for those sorts of things. But when it comes to what farmers grow and the research you do at AGT, and we spoke recently with Birchip Cropping Group, for instance, across in Victoria, what are you looking to achieve with the crops in terms of benefits in yields?
Yeah, so I guess we often try to summarise what we're trying to achieve in terms of helping rural communities thrive by having farmers who are able to be more profitable. And so it's about what can we do to feed into that profitability equation, which is grain yield or production, productive ability, disease resistance, so that's going to be about the cost of production, so trying to reduce the amount of fungicide or insecticide that's required, for example, to be able to grow the crop. And then, of course, the other part is the price. So if you multiply price by productive ability minus the cost of production, that's the overall profitability equation. So we're trying to touch on each of those points. So when it comes to durum, increasing yield, keeping it competitive with bread wheat so that you get the high price, but you also have good productive ability, and then combining that in with good disease resistance. Now, on the durum front, one of the major diseases that durum suffers with is a disease called crown rot. And any growers out there listening at the moment who have grown durum will understand what I'm talking about. And the difficulty is it's a tough disease to breed for. But one of the things we're most excited by is we've put a lot of effort in recent times into building a capacity to be able to develop better crown rot resistant germplasm, and that's something we're going to put a lot of effort into over the next few years.
And so will that feed into this announcement yesterday, which I had to condense into really in summary form, that you've had public sector bodies doing research into the durum germplasm that they had, and now they've put out to tender a commercialisation of that so someone can run with it, and AGT's won that tender.
Yeah, that's right, exactly. And so if we go back nearly 20 years ago, the bread wheat went through this process back in the early 2000s, and that's how AGT was actually formed. We were a spin out of the University of Adelaide and the South Australian government, actually, and then we've taken on other shareholders over time. But we were set up to do bread wheat. Others were the same. Then barley came out, and it's really about trying to attract private investment so that we could invest into better technologies, more intense breeding activities, and then leave the public sector be free to focus on the early generation research that feeds into the breeding programs rather than doing what is effectively a commercial activity. And so Durum has just joined that party, I guess you might say. We'd already been investing in durum breeding, but being able to access that germplasm, which is a word that describes all of the genetics that sits inside of durum, being able to access that and then leverage that into our breeding programs, we're really excited because it gives us an opportunity, we hope, to really accelerate the value that durum provides Australian growers.
Now, just to sum up, what would you say is AGT's sort of signature development or product that you've been able to have out there that people probably have accessed more than anything else?
Yeah, I think growers out there, they'll know about the two varieties, Mace and Scepter, in the area that you're broadcasting into. They've been really important for growers, and so they've been fantastic for growers, I think, and we're really proud to have been part of that story, releasing them for growers to be able to have. I mean, over the years, they've added probably about 10 to 12%, if you add them together, additional production on top of what would have otherwise been produced. And quick scoop, we'll be releasing another variety in a couple of days, I think, called Calibre, and it's the next one. So there was Mace, which added about 4 or 5% on top of the previous variety. Then Scepter added another 6%, and then Calibre's coming out with another 5.5% yield improvement. So,
right.
People sometimes go, oh, it's only 5%, but that's 5% on your bottom line, and that's good value. And we're really excited because what's in our DNA is working with the crop's DNA to ultimately lead to better rural communities, healthier, and so we're really looking forward to the impact of Calibre out in the farming communities.
And so will that be available, say, for next year's cropping season, or a bit too soon to be talking about that?
No, you're absolutely right. Yeah, we try and make sure that when we release a variety, there's going to be a lot of seed available, and there is a few thousand tonne available. However, growers have heard about it before we even release the variety, and orders are flowing in. So, look, if people are keen, I recommend they get their orders in because it is disappearing fast.
So how do they do that?
Yeah, so people can go through the local retailer, their ag supply company, or direct with our affiliates. If they jump on our website, agtbreeding.com.au, they can find our seed affiliates and go direct to the grower who's growing that seed. And we work with local farmers to make that happen. So, yeah, they should be able to get hold of that seed, and we're looking forward to what impact it can have in the future. Well,
certainly we cover across the spectrum of things that we talk about on Flow, the state, federal, political, among other things. And Agriculture Minister's always talking about how great the cropping season is. Good research underpins a lot of that. I mean, certainly seasonal conditions help, but if those yields are up about those 5 to 10% because of good research, that's something the whole state can be proud of.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you hit the nail on the head. It's really about the combination of having the weather. You need the rain, obviously. Having the genetics sitting there, but ultimately it comes down to the growers. They've really invested into some fantastic technology over the last 10 to 20 years, which has led to a more resilient cropping sector producing more than we have before. And I think that's a partnership model that's worked really well for everyone.
Well, Hayden, great to be talking with you and to catch up with one of our neighbours here at Roseworthy, and looking forward to seeing this Calibre product out in action.
Thanks, Ricky.